and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
And that's right, everybody. Welcome back once again to another edition of the Best Seat in the House podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rob Cramer, joined by my co-host, Daniel Bobo Perlin. And Dan, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well today. Unfortunately, this season has been so bad. Like I'm a little mix of upset about it, yelling at these bad treats. All I get. Hold on, I think I got to printing out the secret word. There's a secret word.
A secret word?
Yeah, the tanking.
Tanking?
Tank. Yep.
And you know what happens whenever you say the secret word? We all have to scream. At any time for the rest of the episode that anybody says tanking, we have to scream. So get ready.
It was just, I understand maybe it's a situation where we had to be in a rebuild, but what are we going to pull off to attract Ohtani next year with this? I think maybe we shouldn't have traded. I'm debating if we should have traded Verlander or not. I said maybe Scherzer, but all we were getting was a bunch of shortstops and catchers. How many catchers does one need in a farm system?
Verlander, David Robertson, Mark Canha, Dominic Leone, and Tommy Pham, all of them. The Mets picking up, around or probably just a little bit over $100 million. And the thing that really bothers me, Dan, is I agree with you that they got back a bunch of shortstops, they got back catchers. How many of those do you need? But the thing that really bothers me the most is that out of everything they gave up and all the money they ate, they only got back one top 50 prospect. And, I like Acuna. I think Acuna is going to be a good pickup for the Mets. If you don't know, the Mets got Luis Angel Acuna, the younger brother of Ronald Acuna, the Brave superstar. But I with the amount of money, especially the Mets ate, I would have expected a better haul of prospects. What was your initial reaction to what we got back for the guys we traded?
Yeah, exactly. I was expecting a lot more than what we got back. I was hoping for at least some pitching prospects. That's what we need. It's a cornerstone of every great championship team is pitching. We have nothing to pitching in the department. It's like we're in the point during the off season. We're gonna have to prioritize pitching during the off season. I feel like, in addition to
no doubt about it.
Hopefully, also, and I'm not quite sure exactly how good the pitching is once it's below Ohtani, because there's Ohtani and everything else below that. Even though Aaron Nola looks like would be a good, consolation prize.
Look, I like Aaron Nola a lot, but there is no consolation prize to Shohei Ohtani. That's the guy the Mets have to get. And if you believe what Billy Epler and apparently Steve Cohen told Max Scherzer before they traded him, because what Scherzer said, I completely understand. I don't understand Met fans that have gotten angry at Max Scherzer or Verlander. Like these guys did nothing wrong. Scherzer was at the press conference and he was asked, what the situation was with the Mets, how they approached him, how this deal came about. And he said Billy Epler told him that the Mets were shifting their focus away from being one of the top competitive teams in 2024, and that they would be shifting their focus more to 2025 and 2026, which is insane, especially when he also added on, and Billy Epler said the same thing, and Steve Cohen apparently reiterated it, that the Mets are not going to be going after the tippy top free agent guys, which I'm sorry, call me spoiled as a Met fan after 2 years if you don't like it. But if the Mets are not in on Shohei Ohtani, that is unacceptable. I'm sorry. We might as well just go back to having the Wilpons as the owners if they're not going to be in for Shohei Ohtani. We saw Manny Machado get signed by the Padres. Where were the Padres last year, Dan? Oh, yeah, the NLCS. We saw the Phillies sign Bryce Harper. Where were the Phillies last year, Dan? Oh, yeah, the World Series. So if you're going to spend money, you better do it on these big-name guys. And especially a guy like Ohtani, who's a once-in-a-time free agent, if the Mets are not fully invested in bringing him in, I'm going to lose my mind, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm going to lose my mind. I just hope this isn't an off season where I'm screaming like a maniac, upset, and making Mr. Malunigan piss on pictures of the Billy Epler.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. I mean, I really feel betrayed by this organization in a lot of ways, where they sold us a bill of goods. And not only that, they sold us a bill of goods, they sold a lot of tickets this offseason off the non-existent signing of Carlos Correa, which, I guess some Met fans would be happy that they didn't sign him. But guess what? If you really look at it, I'd still rather have Correa here playing DH or doing whatever rather than seeing Daniel Vogelback out there every day. So, take that, with what you will. Maybe it still is too much money for Correa, but, for his diminished returns. But I'd still rather see him out there every day than Daniel Vogelback. And guess what? As bad as you want to say Correa's been this year, he's still been better than Brett Beatty. And I like Brett Beatty. I think Brett Beatty needs some time, but that's just the fact of the matter. So I don't want to hear anybody crying about Carlos Correa and how the Mets got lucky about not signing him, because, to be honest, the Mets would be a better team if they had Carlos Correa today. That's a fact. I'm sorry. And the other fact is that right now, if the Mets aren't going out there and are planning on being in the tippy top of free agency, what does that mean? Who are they going after? Julio Urias is a free agent this offseason. You're telling me they're not going to go after him? A 25-year-old lefty that has pinched in the clinching game of a World Series before? He's got a ring. He's looking great. He's been in Cy Young competition every year. The Mets aren't going to be in it for him. What do you think, Dan? I think that's ridiculous that those words even came out of Billy Epler's mouth, and it really pisses me off, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just hoping that this was nothing but an angry Max Scherzer. I'm going to be like, I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to have a need to not want to watch Sports Night every night as I do during the off season. Yeah,
you're right, man. And you know what? A lot of people I heard on WFAN yesterday, they were saying the same thing, that maybe this is just, Max Scherzer being angry and burying the Mets, or maybe on the other side, maybe the Mets lied to Scherzer to get him to waive his no-trade clause. But Billy Epler then went out to the press when he had his press conference at the conclusion of the deadline yesterday, and he reiterated the exact same thing that Max Scherzer said. So the Mets are in lockstep right now. Apparently, Billy Epler and Steve Cohen are aligned in the idea that they want to tone things down somehow next year. I don't understand how you do this for 2 years and then pivot like this, especially when 2021, so far, let's be honest, Steve Cohen has owned the team for 2021, 2022, and 2023. 2 out of those 3 years have been a disaster. I know it's not all his fault, but his fingerprints are all over these disasters. So Steve Cohen is not getting off scot-free. I like Steve Cohen. I still trust Steve Cohen. I can't say the same thing about Billy Epler. I like Billy Epler as a guy. Billy Epler is a nice man, but I don't know, especially with his track record with the Mets, at least, of making trades with guys like Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelback coming back to us, when you're giving up pretty decent pieces in Colin Holderman and J.D. Davis, who, by the way, is having a much better year than Daniel Vogelback or Darren Ruff this year. He's only on pace for about 75 RBIs, but who's counting anyway? I don't know. Now, this is the big question to you, Dan, too. If I'm Steve Cohen, and we've talked about this in the past, we both know the Mets' plan is to bring in David Stearns next year as the president of baseball operations. That's the Mets' plan. We know that. Everybody knows that. Who knows what's going to work out, but that's the blueprint that they have right now. And if they're doing that, then the thing I don't understand is, how do you trust Billy Epler to be the guy to break down this roster and reinvest and get those pieces, the prospects and everything that they've wanted? How do we trust Billy Epler if he's not going to be the guy making the calls in a couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever it is? If I was Steve Cohen, I might have saved this whole breakdown of the roster for the offseason. What do you think about that, Dan?
Yeah, exactly. I just don't think. I think we might be seeing a bit of a different tune once David Stern is announced as president of baseball operations, GM, once he takes over.
Yeah, you're right, man. And the other thing we have to keep in mind when we're thinking, about certain things like tanking. When you're thinking about certain things like that, you have to remember too, a lot of these teams that tanked ended up with top 10, top 5 picks. So not only were they trading at the deadline, they were also, and adding prospects from other organizations, they were also drafting high and picking guys high in the draft, in the amateur draft. Well, that's not going to be the case for the Mets this year unless they finish in the top, the bottom 6 of Major League Baseball, because due to the new rules that are just being enforced this year, if you finish in the top 6 of Major League Baseball, then the bottom 6, if you're one of the 6 worst teams, then your pick is locked in. But if you finish in the top, in even as far as number 7, and your team like the Mets, where you're at least $40 million over the luxury tax payroll, or the salary cap, whatever you want to call it, then your pick gets dropped 10 spots. So let's just say that the Mets go out there and have the 7th worst record in baseball this year. You'd sit back and say, okay, hey, we got a top 10 pick. Let's see what we can do with it. That's not going to be the case. That means the Mets would be picking 17th. So, it's not a tear down, and this whole thing isn't going to be as easy for the Mets as it is for a lot of other teams. And luckily, Billy Epler even said that, this isn't going to be one of those situations where it's going to be a couple of years down the road and, it's going to be crappy baseball. He said they still expect to compete next year, which, we like to hear. But I'm sorry, Billy Epler. There's one free agent the Mets have to be in on next year, no matter what, come hell or high water, and that has to be Shohei Ohtani. And if they are not in it, then they have done a disservice to Mets fans everywhere. And they lied to Mets fans, because they told Mets fans that we were done shopping in the bargain basement bin, that we're done going to, the yard sales and picking guys off of the scrap heap. We're going to the gourmet aisle, like Scott Boras said, and picking in the high-end section. And if the Mets are not going to go after Shohei Ohtani, then that was just a big effing lie, right?
Yeah, exactly. All I could say is that I recommend every Met fan a day that I've mentioned a day when the Angels are in town, right? I think maybe we need to do something similar to what happened, and hopefully maybe this gets us the equivalent of what Mike and Amando did. Made that trade that brought Mike Piazza to the Mets. You need the fans to go chant, "We want Shohei" on that day.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Met fans really have to speak up because, I see a lot of Met fans drinking the Kool-Aid, and you have to realize that we have to make our opinions known. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. They need to do it every at bat, every time Shohei Ohtani is at bat during that game. Every
Yeah,
Met
you're
fan.
right.
I'm gonna try to pick up, do the same thing, and I encourage every Met fan watching this and anyone who's watching us to tell other Met fans about it in case they didn't watch it. Hopefully most of you are watching this, but do tell other Met fans about this that we said this. Just chant that every at bat that Shohei Ohtani's at the plate during the game, right? I was spending money on food doing it for Shohei.
Exactly, man. Yeah.
I was hoping the Mets pull off the biggest move of all moves.
Yeah, and with the biggest owner with the deepest pockets in baseball, that's got to mean something. Now, look, I want the Mets to be involved in getting Shoei. I want the Mets to be one of the guys that, one of the teams that are in it no matter what to the last second. The only look, if Otani, I can accept it under the circumstances that either A, he didn't want to come to New York, you know, B, maybe he wants to stay in LA, maybe he likes the West Coast, maybe the money isn't the most important thing. But if Shohei Ohtani is going where the money is and the Mets are not the team throwing the biggest payday at him, then that's unacceptable in my opinion. And this guy is a franchise-altering talent, and he's exactly what the Mets need. He's a bat and an arm all rolled up into one, and the Mets need both of those desperately at this point. And it's unacceptable for them to not be in on Shohei Ohtani. But as we keep it rolling here, Dan, I wanted to ask your opinion. I mean, unless you want to throw something in there at the end.
Yeah. One more thing. Another word of advice to Shohei Ohtani: if we're in a situation where the Mets are going to go after him, do not make this a 1 hour special like that LeBron James debacle. That made it even worse, that disappointment when the Knicks didn't get LeBron James. I said
That's true.
an hour of my life back because I was fuming. I think back, of course, Rosie Shea was still alive, in addition to Mr. Maloonigan, and Rosie Shea was a Beagle. So you could imagine how loud those two barks were when I was yelling at the TV every curse in the book, literally. I was 11. Remember that episode of SpongeBob, the cursing one?
Yes, with the dolphin sound.
After that shit show that aired on ESPN that night.
Yeah, we definitely do not need a decision part 2. So please, Ohtani, take Dan's advice and don't start that crap up. All right, if you are a prospective free agent and you're looking to go to the Mets or you're looking to go to any new team, and you are looking at what the Mets have done, where they signed, Scherzer and Verlander to big deals and then traded both of them within a year. I guess Scherzer a year and a half. Would that make you stay away from the Mets? Because I've heard people say no. I've heard people say that wouldn't affect their opinion. But how could it not? If you know that if things go wrong, they could just turn around and trade you in a couple of months, right?
Yeah, that freaking scares me. Freaking, I don't want to be in a situation where we can't attract the free agents, where I'm just spending most of the season going to minor league games, looking at potentially, this is going to be the players we're going to see in a couple of years. I remember a couple of years, I think around like 2012, I extra looked at some minor league games because I was seeing I figured these were going to be guys that were going to play a factor on a team. When we were winning again, I mean, I saw guys like Nimmo, Conforto rise up. I also saw Alonso rise up in the ranks. I saw there, and I saw, of course, we've also seen recently. We've seen Alvarez. So I was kind of predicting that time. Yeah, I've probably seen someone on this team that's going to be there the next playoff run. I think I said this around 2014 or something like that, right? Lo and behold, a player I was seeing that time in 2014, a guy named Michael Conforto, right, who was just drafted out of college. And this was a quick one. 1 year later, he gets called up. He moved up quickly. Probably started with it in high A, not that long. He was double A. It's gets called up. We make that Cespedes trade. I'm at the first World Series ever. It's still there.
Yeah, very true. Very true, man. And, obviously guys like Conforto rose through the system very quickly. We can hope that some of the guys the Mets got back rise through the system as quickly. As a matter of fact, I do have a list right here of some of the guys they got back, courtesy of our friends at Metsmerized Online. Go follow them if you'd like at Metsmerized.com, at Metsmerized on Twitter. So look at this here. From what we've given up, Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford, 2 top 5 prospects in their system. Got back Jeremy Rodriguez at shortstop from the Arizona Diamondbacks for Tommy Pham. That kid's only 17 years old. And then they also got back Jeremiah Jackson, the utility guy. Now, if you look at the other guys, it's Phil Bickford, and let me zoom out a little bit because they also got back it's Phil Bickford and Adam Kolarek. Those are the 2 guys that are now on the Mets roster. They got back from the Dodgers for cash yesterday. So what do you think, Dan? What do you think of this haul that the Mets have gotten from this? I know me and you discussed it a little bit earlier, but looking at this full list, it seems like it's just a little bit light, right?
It feels like light. Maybe there's one guy in anything. The other part of the trade, I thought that didn't make sense. Why trade for even people below low A? Guys that are in the complex league.
Yep, you're totally right about that.
Yeah, that one. I feel like also the Mets maybe need to not I don't know how to say prospect hoard, because prospects are very hit or miss. So some of these I feel like down the line they might could be a trade bait.
I totally agree, man. Actually, that's a very good point because I think especially too with a lot of these middle infielders, shortstops, the catchers, like we've mentioned, we have prospects at those positions. Obviously, we have Francisco Lindor, who's going to be here. He's not a prospect, but he's on the roster, so that's blocking a spot for any middle infielder. And, the same thing with the catcher. We got Francisco Alvarez there, who's going to be there for a while. We got Kevin Pareda in the minor league still, for shortstop, Ronnie Mauricio down there still too. So, and that's just naming the guys that we had in the system before the deadline. So I totally agree with you that we could see some trades, hopefully, on the horizon. That's definitely something that you have to keep in mind too, because with all this this prospect hoarding, as you said, because one other thing too that made me laugh, and it's just how carried away Met fans can get at times. I was reading people, and it wasn't just one; it was a bunch of people saying that now the Mets actually have, and the Mets were a bottom 20, from 20 to 30 minor league system before these deals, or actually it might have been around 19. I think it was 19. Now I'm seeing people say that the Mets with these trades are top 3 minor league team, and that's not the case at all. The Mets fall probably now, and from all the evaluators like Mike Mayer from Mets Mirage, like I've seen, and other people on the MLB Pipeline website and everything like that, they're saying the Mets probably fall in somewhere around 11 to 15 right now. So let's just say 11. Let's be nice at 11. So you're telling me that the Mets traded 2 Hall of Famers, 6 players off their roster, and ate all that money, and still do not have a top 10 farm system in baseball. I think that says a lot. I think it shows, like me and you have been talking about, that they didn't get back as a lot of people may have thought. And hey, I like the fact, I like the guys that the Mets got back from the Astros, but you don't know, nobody knows anything. Like, those guys have only been drafted. One got drafted in 2021, and the other guy got drafted in 2022. 2 young guys you don't really know anything about yet. The one thing we do have to really emphasize is that, we all know what the Mets are doing, Dan, and what the Mets are doing right now is. All right. So now we got that out of the way again.
I feel like when things like baseball, things like this happen, it just dominates the headlines. I remember, like, in somewhere around, I guess, February, days leading up to Super Bowl 42. I meant the Giants Patriots, right? So I meant such a memorable Super Bowl. There was a headline days leading up to the Super Bowl, a headline that the Mets had just acquired Johan Santana in the trade. I don't know if you remember that. That trade.
Well, I remember that well. You're right. I believe it was February 4th, 2008. And right after that trade was made, I had a nice conversation on WFAN with the great, legendary Steve Summers.
I wish I could hear that. I don't know how I did not stay up to listen to that one, but I just remember seeing that headline in the Daily News. Like, this was days leading up to a local team in the Super Bowl, and this thing just dominated the headlines when I saw it happen.
That's a good point. That just goes to show how, baseball in New York, man, it's one of those 365 days a year thing, So we take our baseball seriously, and everybody was wrapped up in that Giants Super Bowl run. They beat the freaking undefeated Patriots. So everybody was pumped up. Nobody knew they were going to beat them yet at that point, but everybody was excited for the game. And yeah, it was definitely. It took the Super Bowl off the back pages for a couple of days when the Mets went out there and picked up Johan. One more thing, before we get out of here, Dan, is that we saw the Yankees went out and actually made a deal. Relief pitcher Kenyon Middleton from the Chicago White Sox, and that's a trade that, to be honest, for what I've seen from a lot of Yankee fans, it kind of pissed them off a little bit, because let's be honest, the Yankees did not need another relief pitcher. The Yankees needed a bat and someone to protect Aaron Judge, right, Dan?
Yeah, exactly. They did not pull the trade for a bat. I imagine Yankee fans are probably feeling the same way like we did, us Met fans felt last year when they made that half-ass of a trade last year.
Yeah, that whole deadline was the same thing. You're right. So, look, that is one thing that I will give the Mets, that the Yankees, and Brandon Tierney on WFAN said this earlier today, so I'll give him the credit. And he is right to an extent, whether you like the plan or not, that the Mets have a plan right now, and the Yankees really don't. And, me and you both said this last year, that I think, look, I've been a defender of Brian Cashman for years. I have thought the world of the job that Brian Cashman did. But you really can't argue that since 2017, the Yankees have squandered a lot of talent. And the Yankees have not been – sure, they signed Garrett Cole, which was a great move, and hell, the guy could win the Cy Young this year. But the fact of the matter is the Yankees need bats to protect Aaron Judge, and not going after a guy like Harper, not going after a guy like Manny Machado, and not going after some of these bigger bats that have been available the last few years have really proven to be a detriment to the Yankees. I mean, even not bringing back a guy like Andrew Benintendi, who would fit in perfectly in the Yankees lineup right now. They need a contact hitter like that. So, I do have to say, okay, the Yankees at least went out and got somebody, but it's definitely not the guy that they should have gotten. So, I think that's, a swing and a miss for Cashman, right? I mean, I would say most of the time, Brian Cashman makes a really good deal, for the trade deadline for the Yankees. Even if you don't like what he does in the offseason or whatever, usually he's able to swing a pretty decent trade and upgrade the Yankees at the deadline. And that just wasn't the case this year, right, Dan?
No, I never expected this. I feel like this year, this Yankees team, they look like they're very hit or miss. They're either gonna barely squeak in the playoffs or just barely not make it. Like maybe like pull out of it. Weeks pull out of it. Could be realistic a possibility.
No doubt about it, man. I mean, it kind of reminds me a lot of 2008, where the Yankees were in 2008, the last year of Yankee Stadium, where they just missed the playoffs. But they were still over 500. They were still a decent team, but just not playoff worthy. And this is the first time I've been saying all year that I thought the Yankees would figure it out at some point, especially once they got Judge back. But I think the fact of the matter is that Judge was just out for a little bit too long, and the Yankees could not, save the season in that meantime. So it's unfortunate for the Yankees and the Yankee fans, but that's the way it looks like things are rolling this year. And as a matter of fact, I think that's just going to be it for us, Dan. Before we get out of here, do you have any plugs for yourself?
Sure, I got it. One thing before the plugs, I got to give a congratulations to the class of 2024 inductees to the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I mean, and I've been seeing one thing amongst these inductees I noticed notable. I'm seeing a driver by the name of Jimmy Johnson. I remember this guy as a rookie. Talk about
that.
That make you feel old? See a guy get it. Remember him as a rookie?
It's true, man. It's funny when you see guys like that starting to go in, even seeing, some of these recent Hall of Famers in baseball and everything go in. It's funny. Remember seeing them start playing even, actually we haven't really mentioned it yet, but the Hall of Fame game, football officially starts. As you see, I got my Jet shirt on. Football officially starts tomorrow with the Hall of Fame game between the Jets and the the Cleveland Browns. And the Jets have two guys going in the Hall of Fame. Joe Klecko, who it makes sense. He's a great player. I never really saw him play. He was retired by the time that I was coming around. But Darrelle Revis, I remember seeing the Jets draft Darrelle Revis. I watched Darrelle Revis' entire career with the Jets and the other 2 years. And it's just surreal seeing him go in now. So I definitely know what you mean about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I imagine back watching the Hall of Fame ceremony on a NFL Network.
Oh, no doubt about it, buddy. You got that right.
Finish my plugs. You can follow me on Twitter, Bobo103NYC, and Instagram, Bobo718DK, and on YouTube, one word, Daniel Curlin.
Absolutely. So make sure to follow Dan there and subscribe to all of our stuff. Subscribe to his YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube at Best Seat in the House Podcast over there. Check us out. Check me out on Twitter at Cramer NY, and also our Twitter account, BSith_podcast. So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in and checking out our show as always. And so I'm the host, Rob Cramer. This is my co-host, Daniel Bobo Curlin, and that's going to do it for us this week on Best Seat in the House podcast. We'll catch you next week, everybody.